The 80s rock and roll scene was magic. As crazy as people think the 80s were, as far as the partying and this, everything was bigger than life, and that was also because of MTV. So you had Van Halen, you had Bon Jovi, Def Leppard. Quiet Riot was a huge, they were the first band of that era, the 80s, to have a #1 album. And that's when the floodgates opened, 1983, and that was when I basically said, this is what I'm gonna do for the rest of my life. I was playing sports as a little kid, and I was sort of playing sports and playing music at the same time. By the time 1984 rolled around, I was done with everything. It was just full on, at 13 years old, the blind faith in rock and roll. But the 80s scene, it was just incredible because it was much different to nowadays where everybody's attention span is so small. Back then, you lived your life for these bands and for MTV and watching videos. I would come home from school and play my guitar and watch MTV for 5-6 hours at a time just to see those 3 great live Van Halen videos. So This Is Love, Unchained, and hear about it later. And that's what it was like for everybody that I knew. We just were so invested in it. It was great times. I mean, beautiful girls, loud clothes, fluorescent colors, big hair. I mean, I had a perm out to here, the perfect Eddie Van Halen. All I wanted to be was Eddie Van Halen. So it was, it was magic, man. It was the greatest times that we had. And it was, though we were all partying and we all found out later, what some of the older bands were doing, but I was a teenager, so my friends and stuff, we were dabbling in all the stuff and having fun and drinking, but smoking cigarettes, but it was just magic, and it was all based around that great 80s hard rock and heavy metal. We lived for it, and we lived the life, so to speak. Well, yeah, when we were making the first Trixter record, so as we were building steam, the first guy that took us under his wing and really helped us was Jon Bon Jovi. And it was for him, and he taught the same thing to the Skid Row guys who were also big supporters of us and our brothers. We were all part of this, it was Bon Jovi, then came Skid Row, and then it was Trixter. It was kind of like the trifecta, the way it was gonna happen. And John was the first guy who listened to the first demo tape that Trixter made and said, hey man, you guys got a lot of potential. I can hear the songs, keep writing songs, and he would drill that into me. Just keep writing, building your craft. And there was also a thing that, with the success of Slippery When Wet with Bon Jovi, there was this thing of co-writers, the Desmond Childs, the Mutt Lange with Def Leppard. What happened to me as being the primary songwriter in Trixter, my managers and sort of labels that were looking at us, they kept saying, you guys aren't ready yet. You're too young, we want a development deal. We want you to write. Steve, go write with this guy. There was a guy in Jersey, Jack Ponte, who was a great songwriter, co-wrote some of the early Bon Jovi stuff. He taught me so much about structure and harmonies, how to build like Mutt Lange style harmonies. By the time we got signed, things were really building, and I had 1 in a Million by the time we got signed. I had Give It To Me Good, which I, as soon as we started getting momentum, my manager, he bought me a 4-track setup so I could have my own home recording studio. And that was integral because I could sit there and I learned how to bounce tracks so I could make these really good demos of the songs. And I specifically remember Give It To Me Good, that song, I wrote it in 15 minutes. It basically wrote itself. I picked up an acoustic guitar and I started playing that open G chord, that everything G to C, and dun 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 dun. And all of a sudden I wrote this song, and it was lyrically a song about, our lives at the time, my life, You know, hey baby, tell me what's your name. Very self-explanatory. You know, and we had, at that point, we had started playing in New York City. We were playing Staten Island, Pennsylvania. You know, as worldly as you could be at that time, living in the tri-state area. It was that song that, you know, kind of spurred on everything else that came from the record. But we had a lot of ideas, and it was still putting them together. 1 in a Million, the original version of it, the melody, the verse, pre-chorus and chorus were there. But when we made the record, my producer, Bill Ray, and his brother Jim, who co-produced the record, they were like, the song needs something. So as time went on making the first Trixter record, whether it was Heart of Steel or 1 in a Million, we didn't have that beginning thing. And I remember Bill Ray saying to me, Steve, you gotta come up with something. It's gotta be like Photograph, Def Leppard. And I just all of a sudden picked up my guitar and went, down and out, down and out. And it was like, boom, there it is. And those are those magical things about having a team and working with a real producer. There was a show in the 80s and 90s called Metal Shop. And there was a DJ who worked on the radio station, Ian O'Malley. And I would listen to it every Friday night. Metal Shop. This guy, Charlie Kendall, was the guy who did the intro. It was the coolest, you know, interviews, played music, interviews with the guys talking about their new albums, all the great bands, whether it was Van Halen, Dio, Motley Crue, Def Leppard, Rat, Dokken. It was just kind of, you know, it was where you found out what was going on. What had happened was our first record came out, and Ian, he had heard the record and he knew we were from Jersey, he was a New York guy, Boston, whatever, and he loved it. And he was like, he didn't know how to get in touch with us. So he was on the show and I was listening to it and he goes, I just got this new record from this band from New Jersey, Trixter. If anybody out there knows how to get in touch with them, I want to have them on the show. So that was it, man. That was the first time. And then the week later, our manager called him and said, yeah, I manage Trixter, we'll get you on, you know, interview with Steve and Pete. And that was the first time hearing Trixter. We had been on college radio, there was a station in Jersey, WSOU, but hearing Give It To Me Good and Bad Girl, I think that's what they played, or Line of Fire, on real big terrestrial radio, one of the big New York stations, WNEW. It was a dream come true. I remember sitting in my Pontiac J2000, turning the stereo up to as loud as it can go, and it was, you know, again, man, it was one of those moments where you just go, this is the coolest thing in the world, and I want more. Yeah, the first arena show Trixter ever did was we opened for Poison. I believe it was February of 1991. And that was, you know, playing an arena was the goal when we started Trixter. When I started the band and got the guys together, it was really never about, oh, we want to sell 10 million records. All we ever wanted to do was play the Meadowlands Arena in New Jersey, our hometown arena. And we always said, when we play the Meadowlands, we play any arena, we're done. We made it big, that's all, that was the goal. It was very simple. By the time we played, it was in Muskegon, Michigan, with Poison and Slaughter. Poison was on their Flesh and Blood tour. We had already been out on tour for, I'm gonna say 4 or 5 months already. You know, and Give It To Me Good was already a big hit. We were just about to release 1 in a Million, and that was gonna be the second single that was gonna blow the record wide open, which it did. And I remember that feeling. We got into town the day before, and we went to the arena, like doing the Rocky thing. We wanted to go to the arena, and I remember me and PJ walking in and just like seeing it. You know, we've been in arenas many times before, but it's a real different feeling when you walk in and know tomorrow night there's gonna be 10,000 people in this place going nuts, and it's Trixter's first arena show. A lot can happen. A lot of great things could happen, but also a lot can go wrong. So it was like that nervous energy, and the next day we get there. The Poison guys and the Slaughter guys are unbelievable to us, so nice. Brett Michaels still to this day, one of our dear friends, just did a gig with him 2 weeks ago. But he came and said, guys, I just want you to go out there, have fun. CC, Steve, get out there. Look at your guitar rig, it's bigger than mine. At that time, I had one of those Bradshaw rigs. I had two 24 space racks, and I'm the opening act. Like, what the hell was I doing? Typical 80s mentality, bigger is better. And I remember we went on stage, and it was like, you know, before we go on, for those about to rock, AC/DC was our intro song. And I remember just looking at, you know, the four guys and just going, here we go. This is it. This is the moment we've been waiting for. And I kid you not, when we got out on that stage, we crushed it. We owned that show, and it was all the years since 1984 to 1991, 7 years leading up to that moment. Forget about making the record, forget about making videos. It was all about being on that stage and kicking ass. And for that half hour, I think we did 7 songs, and it was like that moment where we were meant to do this. And we had put in the work in the clubs, we had done theaters, and finally we get to do an arena. And it was, you know, boom, we hit the rock and roll home run. And it was one of the greatest moments of my life, for sure.